This session is going to be moderated by the CEO and Executive Director, BMGI. Ladies and gentlemen, challenges in establishing India as the preferred manufacturing destination, Naresh Raisinghani.
Khurakiwala said at the end. And I think this should be something which the government should seriously think about. To have them on steroids, we should change the government every year, and every 6 to 8 months we'll get things done. Okay. So having said that, for in terms of the meta thing, let's come to certain things which the corporate can do about. If we were to see in the last few decades, we have seen a lot of change in the state which is there. There have been substantial kind of constraints which are there. But if I were to talk about India still, we see several of the MNCs are trying to establish base in India. We see, I mean, just to take few names, we have seen GE come down to India and wanting to set India as a manufacturing hub. If I were to talk about some of the Korean firms, we have LG and Samsung which are there. We have a Finnish firm named Nokia which is there. And likewise, there are German firms also, Volkswagen and several others which are coming down to India and setting base. So despite all of the constraints that we have, what is it that you see are some of the critical things which are attracting these firms to India to make India as a manufacturing hub, not only for India, but also for across India, outside of India? Yeah, any of the panelists.
I believe there are two or three things. One is that we are a billion people. We have a very large market of our own, basically. The second, I think the democracy, rule of law, also provides some degree of comfort for international investors in India. And thirdly, they also find that the competence which is required in terms of knowledge of engineering or information also is helping us. So I think these are 3 or 4 factors. Language is obviously their English, which makes anyone to look, a global company wants to be there, and we are growing. And after the BRIC, where they identified that India and China would be one of the major players in 20, 30 years, and the organization which they think in terms of a long term wants a base in India.
I think, add to what Doctor said, I think the technical talent is what is attracting them, and I think the frugal innovation, what our people are able to do, the kind of creativity we show here, they can take it to the world. Why GE came here is that disruptive innovations happen in this country and then they take it to the larger world. And you will see a lot of MNCs on their board, a lot of Indians have made it to the parent board. I think it's the technical talent that is attracting the talent.
You see, additionally, MNCs believe that what has happened in China will eventually happen in India. Another thing is, in China, they face certain problems related to legal issues, related to copyrights, which they feel India is a much better country in terms of copyrights. Then another thing is in terms of English-speaking population, where they can understand and people are much more transparent. Then another important thing, of course, as Dr. Abil has said about the market, and much larger working population. Like we have almost 63% people in working age population and much lower dependency rate. So India will continuously provide manpower at a much lower cost for manufacturing sector.
See, one of the new aspect which is there is the return of investment, the foreign companies who have been there earlier. It is far more attractive and they get good reasonable return from India compared to what they have been getting from China. So even though we don't offer great opportunities because of various other reasons as much as China does, but at the same time they feel that in spite of all our problems, they feel it still be worthwhile being in India. But we want many more companies to believe that and not few companies.
Well, you would observe that, the developed world is not growing at the pace they should have been developing. And the reason we know that low fertility rate, lower availability of, working population, things like that. So the future, I would not straight away venture into comparison of India with China, but I would say that future belongs to countries like India and China where the growth rate is much faster. So it suits, any worthwhile investor to invest in countries like this. And India has emerged as a low-cost platform, manufacturing platform, and low-cost innovation platform. You find that many of the leading pharma companies, Fortune 500 companies, they are going to, they are getting clinical research done in India. So India has the potential, and in talent-driven innovation, I think India is one of the fastest growing countries.
In our industry, it's been, I represent the building material industry, and it's been clearly what you said, Habibji, is the urbanization which is taking place. So 31% of India is urbanized currently, and we feel, they say that in the next 15 to 20 years, it would be close to 40 to 45%. And that is an insurance for the building material industry, where the consumption in most sectors is so low. It's so much lower than China, if we had to even compare China. I think the delta to be made in India versus China is just extremely significant, and that's why people are coming here, along with the talent pool which we have. I'm not too sure of whether we are still very competitive as far as a low-cost base from a point of view of labor. That's purely because of our labor laws. But if there was any improvement in this, any significant improvement, it would further improve the delta of the earnings potential of these foreign companies coming into India. And one more thing which brings them into India is that as a population, we're becoming more and more brand conscious. So a lot of the new brands coming in and setting up base is getting a great foothold, and being able to charge that premium what they get in foreign countries, which wasn't true of India about 15, 20 years ago.
I think when for any overseas company, when they think for going to comparatively lower cost manufacturing destination, the choices today are very limited. It's not that there are 50 countries there in the radar list. And within those choices, if somebody wants to come to the subcontinent, I think the first attraction for them would be that a democratic system of governments is in our country in comparison to the Pakistan or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka there. So people feel that the money and the investment will be much safer in India. Second, I believe the understanding of English language, lots of supply of technocrats as well as management students in last 10, 20 years. And also the people see whether the manufacturing base in India would serve the domestic need, or they want to re-export from here to other part. Yes, if their objective is to serve the domestic country, it's a growing market, big market. And also if it is for the re-export, a lot of R&D base also can be established in India along with the manufacturing with a comparatively lesser cost, and re-export the products to some other country.
I just would like to add to this. Cost is a bit of a misnomer for India. We are a low-cost economy, but the productivity is very low. So if you adjust for the productivity, the cost is not good. Companies which succeed are the ones which can get the productivity of the West and the cost of the India. And what we have seen in our case as well, we have been able to relocate facilities from overseas into India at 50% cost of China, and produce at a cost much lower because you could get the productivity of those labor. So the good news is
You want me to add something? Okay. So I might be slightly contrary to all the panelists over here, because I think I'd like to take the point which 5 years ago, when we spoke about that India is going to be the next manufacturing giant after China, at least 7 years ago, I do recall. But what has happened is, I think over the last probably 5 to 6 years, a lot of manufacturing is beginning to move back to the developed world. And the reason for that is the developed world has actually become very, very productive, extremely productive. So what you're beginning to see is the cost arbitrage or the labor arbitrage, which you had in countries like India, China, is no longer kind of becoming a competitive advantage because the developed world has become extremely productive. So if I say at least large companies like ours and many other organizations, we see that the manufacturing is slowly inching back to the US or to other places. But then there's a flip side to this. And the flip side to this is, yes, everybody wants access to this market, but you can only have access to this market provided you have a product, a technology, which is really a value proposal which can be actually driven in this market. If you don't have the price value proposition in this market, you really can't do it. So I think a number of large MNCs, what they're beginning to do is, what you see the large MNC syndrome is now, to set up the large technology centers in the country. I mean, we have a very large technology center. Why do we do that? We do that because we understand the value that needs to get created in this market. We can actually build products and solutions for this market. And in that sense, then you start actually building a reverse innovation strategy of saying that, okay, if I'm able to build value here, then I can actually export it back. And in a process that in the developed world you can still actually attract more value. And hopefully in that process what you'll do is you'll also actually access the local market. So for the MNCs, for the large groups, the market's still very small for India. It needs to kind of develop. But if you're able to actually tune, innovate value propositions which are relevant to this market, you not only create for the country, but you create globally. And that's, I think, is a trick now for us to look at, not really from a productivity standpoint, not really from a labor arbitrage or cost standpoint. Right. I mean, there's a lot to be done right now in the country.
Okay. So I think quite some interesting views of why it is attracting, a contrary view that probably it's moving back to developed, and also the point that we can probably be better than China. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up on both the sides, on the developed side as well as the China side, which we talked about, in India. What I need to understand from this esteemed team is China today exports roughly about 1.8 trillion plus USD, which is equivalent to the complete GDP of India. And if I talk about developed countries, and I will take a small country which might not be US, but if I talk about Singapore, Singapore also has a substantial large amount of exports compared to India. So what, besides the fact that there is so much of attraction, what do you think are some of the things which are probably India challenges? And I'm looking at it more from the corporate side because we have talked about it more from the state level. But what are some of the challenges which we see should be overcome, which can make it even more, like some of us were saying, to become more attractive for us?
I want to respond on the China part of it.
Sure.
I think China, if you see that there's a declining competitiveness over the last 4 years. The wages have gone 4 times the Indian wage rate. So there is an opportunity there. But the issue about us is what China has done right and what we haven't done is the importance of training. If you look at the vocational training, there are 20 million students they take every year. We take less than 2 million. And I think what we have lost out is a blue-collar creativity. And what India needs to do is get the focus back onto the training of blue-collar guys. We are not getting the best guys into the technical field. So to make technical and manufacturing aspirational, we don't get the best engineers. They all go to other sectors. We don't get the best blue-collar guys. And I think one thing we can get the advantage is by if we can focus back onto the innovation and onto the blue-collar training. I think that's the key thing. And I think then perhaps that challenge we need to meet.
In my view, I think the biggest challenge today for, as Doctor also mentioned, that nobody wants to come to the manufacturing area because thinking is a big headache area. First headache to obtain all the licenses. Second headache to maintain all the labor harmony and everything. And end of the day, after putting so much efforts, if your significant time you are wasting for sorting out the problems which doesn't add to your productivity, people feel that same amount of time, money and energy if invested some other sector, it could have been given the better results. So I think first we need a very conducive ecosystem where the new entrants can come much free manner and they can focus their time and talent into the productivity rather than sorting out government issues. This is the first thing. Second thing I fully endorse his view that in manufacturing setup, India's 16% GDP or whatever it is, but we are mostly the labor intensive kind of industry in the manufacturing. Less focus has been given for the automation. Less focus has been given for product innovation. We love to sell the commodity item because ease for selling or ease for manufacturing. And very less we have paid attention to the human resource development and mostly, as I completely endorse his view, the blue-collar skill set development. Third, which we have already started feeling the heat, the availability of the manpower, be it skilled, be it unskilled, forget that. But I think today is the government, some of the government policies, I am not any political party or to endorse anything, but if you are giving someone 200 days free stipend, and who is going to come to work for 8 to 10 hours in a day and sweating your things and take home 8,000, 10,000, 12,000, 20,000 rupees? So people feel that my basic need, I can get my bread, I can get my shelter of 200 rupees per day for 200 days in a year. So I think by this manner, we are not encouraging people to work at all, to come to the industry. So I think that the availability is one of the major challenge today. So one is a policy, one is the environment, One is the training, innovation, and availability of the manpower.
I have slightly a different take on the whole subject. I believe, as a country, we are filled with entrepreneurs, unlike no other country in the world, including China. Indians basically are entrepreneurs. And I think whatever we do in terms of our ecosystem, we must encourage this entrepreneurship. First, as I mentioned to you, make it simple for people to enter the business. Look at the IT industry, for example. 20 years back, it was hardly existence. When there were an opportunity, there were no barriers. Even there was a knowledge and skill gap. What happened? Little schools came all over the place. Some of the IT companies created their own skill building and learning method to meet their requirement. So I think my thought is fundamentally that we have less of government on one hand, and provide the basic infrastructure of power, ports, roads, what we need, because that's a hygiene factor. Without that, you can't even run a factory or do anything. I think this country is capable, even if there are problems here and there, we will find, still moving forward, get you 8-9% growth. But if government further supports, you might get into double-digit growth. But that is the key to this. And I think it's quite all right if the government wants to make it an inclusive development.